The red warning lights bathed the sensor bay in an eerie glow as Ensign Cole stared at his readings for the third time. Something was wrong with the equipment. It had to be. The massive shape moving through space toward them couldn't possibly exist. Cole rubbed his 4 eyes and checked the calibration again. The Velthari were known throughout the galaxy for their precision and attention to detail. Their insectoid minds processed information faster than most species, which made them perfect for sensor operations. But right now, Cole wished he was somewhere else. The readings showed a vessel approaching their position. Not just any vessel, but something huge. The computer estimated it was over 3 kilometers long and packed with enough metal to build a small moon. Yet, according to every database in the Imperial archives, no ship matching this description had ever been built. Senior Operator Thex? Cole called to his supervisor, his voice carrying the slight buzz that all Velthari voices had. I need you to verify something. Thex glided over on his 6 legs, his carapace gleaming under the sensor bay lights. As senior operator, he had seen everything the galaxy could throw at them. Pirates, rebels, unknown species, spatial anomalies. Nothing surprised him anymore. What have you found, Ensign? Cole gestured at his screen. Large vessel, bearing 27 Mark IV, distance approximately 50,000 kilometers and closing. The problem is, it doesn't match anything in our records. Vex's compound eyes focused on the display. The shape was angular, crude even. No smooth curves or elegant design that marked Imperial engineering, no energy shielding visible. Just raw metal and what looked like primitive thruster systems? Run a full-spectrum analysis, Vex ordered. Check for cloaking devices, holographic projections, anything that might explain this. Cole's claws clicked rapidly across his console. Already done, Senior Operator. This is real. The mass readings are consistent, the energy signatures are stable, and the propulsion system is actually functional. Propulsion system? Vex leaned closer. What type? That's the strange part. It appears to be using fusion drives. Simple. Hydrogen fusion, like what primitive species use for their first interstellar flights. Vex's antennae twitched, a sign of confusion among his people. Fusion drives? No one has used pure fusion for deep space travel in over 1,000 years. The fuel requirements alone would make it impossible to travel between systems. The computer agrees with you, Senior Operator. Yet the vessel is maintaining a steady velocity of 0.7 light speed. With fusion drives, it should have run out of fuel centuries ago. The 2 Velthari stared at the impossible readings. In the background, the normal sounds of the sensor bay continued. The hum of processing units, the quiet conversations of other operators, the distant thrum of the ship's engines. Everything was normal except for the impossible ship heading straight toward them. Contact the bridge, Vex decided. Commander. Roth needs to see this. The command deck of the Imperial Dreadnought Sovereign's might was a marvel of engineering. Representatives from a dozen species worked in perfect harmony, each contributing their unique abilities to the ship's operation. The HiveMind operators processed thousands of data streams simultaneously. The crystalline shard navigators calculated jump coordinates with mathematical precision. The gaseous drift beings handled communications across multiple frequency bands. Commander. Roth stood at the center of it all, his tall frame commanding respect from every species present. The Velthari had earned their position as the Empire's primary military commanders through centuries of successful campaigns. Their logical minds and quick decision-making had brought peace to the galaxy. Commander, the communications officer announced, Sensor Bay reports an anomalous contact. Roth's mandibles clicked once, a sign of acknowledgement. Display it on the main screen. The view screen flickered to life, showing a 3-dimensional representation of the mysterious vessel. Gasps echoed from several bridge stations as the crew saw the impossible ship for the first time. Analysis, Wrath commanded. Senior Operator Vex appeared on a smaller communication screen. Commander, we have a vessel of unknown origin approaching our position. Length approximately 3 kilometers, mass consistent with heavy cruiser class, but the design matches nothing in our databases. Origin? Unknown, sir. The vessel appeared on our sensors 12 minutes ago, traveling at high sublight speed. Its trajectory suggests it came from outside Imperial space, possibly from the Outer Rim territories. Wrath studied the image. The ship looked primitive, almost crude compared to Imperial designs. Yet something about it troubled him. Weapons? We detect multiple energy signatures that could be weapon systems, but they're using technology we don't recognize. The power readings are substantial. Communications? A drift operator's voice whispered through the bridge speakers. The vessel is broadcasting on multiple frequencies, Commander. However, the signal patterns are archaic. They're using communication protocols that predate Imperial standardization. Roth's compound eyes narrowed. How old? Approximately 1,000 years, sir. These frequencies were common during the early expansion period, before the Empire established unified communication standards. The bridge fell silent. Everyone knew the history. The early expansion period had been a violent time when dozens of species fought for control of the galaxy. The Empire had emerged victorious, bringing order and peace to the stars. But that was ancient history. No one used those old frequencies anymore. Scan for life signs, Wrath ordered the sensor operators. Voice carried a note of uncertainty. We're detecting biological signatures, Commander, but they single quotes read ... unusual. The life forms appear to be carbon-based, but they don't match any known species profile. Elaborate. The beings aboard that vessel seem to be bipedal, roughly 2 meters tall, with a skeletal structure we've never encountered. Their brain activity patterns are unlike anything in our xenobiology database. Wrath felt a chill run through his exoskeleton. In his 40 years of service, he had encountered hundreds of species. The Empire's databases contained detailed information about every known intelligent life form in the galaxy. Yet here was a ship full of beings that didn't exist in any record. Time to intercept? At current velocity, the vessel will reach our position in approximately 6 hours, Commander. Roth made his decision. Alert the fleet. I want all ships to maintain defensive positions. Prepare a diplomatic party, but keep our weapon systems ready. Should we contact Imperial Command? Not yet. Let's see what we're dealing with first. As the bridge crew carried out his orders, Wrath continued to stare at the impossible ship. Something deep in his military instincts told him this was more than just a first contact situation. This was something that would change everything. The ship that didn't exist was coming straight at them, and Commander Wrath had the feeling that the galaxy would never be the same again. Deep in the Imperial archives, dust particles danced in the pale light filtering through ancient storage chambers. Dr. Nim had spent most of her life in these forgotten corridors, surrounded by the accumulated knowledge of 1,000 civilizations. As one of the few remaining Keeper-class beings, her elongated form was perfectly adapted for navigating the narrow spaces between data crystals and memory banks. The emergency call from Admiral Voss had reached her 3 hours ago. The Admiral's message was simple but urgent. Find everything about ships using primitive fusion drives and unknown communication frequencies. The galaxy's most powerful military mind was asking a librarian for help, which meant something extraordinary was happening. Nim's 6 delicate arms worked simultaneously, pulling data crystals from their storage slots and inserting them into her portable reader. Most of the information was routine. Trade records, diplomatic exchanges, technical specifications from minor species. Nothing that would explain the impossible vessel the Third Fleet had detected. She moved deeper into the archives, reaching sections that hadn't been accessed in centuries. The dust here was so thick it formed clouds around her movements. These records predated the Empire's standardization protocols, when different species kept their own separate databases. Her reader chimed softly. One of the crystals contained references to primitive propulsion systems. Nim's large eyes focused on the display as she read through the technical specifications. Most of it was standard information about early spaceflight, but one entry caught her attention. Fusion-based interstellar drive systems, employed by species classification 7834 during the early expansion period. Note: Species 7834 eliminated. During First Galactic War, all records to be archived under historical curiosities. Nim's breathing quickened. Species 7834 was destroyed over 1,000 years ago. Yet their propulsion technology matched what the Third Fleet was reporting. She pulled up the full classification file, her hands trembling slightly as she accessed information that had been forgotten for centuries. The file was sparse. Most records from that period had been lost or deliberately destroyed. But what remained painted a picture of a species that had been considered unremarkable by galactic standards. No psychic abilities, no natural armor, no biological advantages. They had compensated with technology and what the reports called unusual tactical flexibility. Nim continued reading, her excitement growing with each new detail. The species had been classified as adaptive and unpredictable. They had fought the early galactic powers using strategies that confounded military analysts. Their ships were described as crude but effective, their crews as tenacious and resourceful. Most importantly, they had called themselves humans. The data crystal contained coordinates for their homeworld, a small planet in what was now the Outer Rim territories. According to the records, the planet had been destroyed during the final campaign of the First Galactic War. The human species had been declared extinct, their colonies scattered and their technology absorbed by the victorious powers, but something in the file didn't match the official history. Nim found references to human settlements that had been lost to deep space rather than destroyed. Several reports mentioned human ships that had vanished without a trace, their crews and passengers unaccounted for. The military commanders of that era had assumed these were simply casualties of war. What if they had been wrong? Nim's reader chimed again. Another crystal contained battle reports from the human homeworld's final siege. The descriptions were disturbing. Human defenders had continued fighting even when their position was hopeless. They had used their own damaged ships as weapons, turning defeat into devastating counterattacks. Even facing overwhelming odds, they had inflicted casualties that shocked the early Imperial forces. The final entry in the file was from the commanding general of the invasion force. His words sent chills through Nim's ancient form. The human species has been eliminated from their homeworld. However, we have been unable to account for approximately 30% of their population. Several deep space colonies remain unlocated and numerous ships escaped our blockade. Recommend continued monitoring of Outer Rim territories for surviving human remnants. That monitoring had clearly been discontinued. The Empire had assumed the scattered survivors would eventually die out or be absorbed by other species. No one had imagined they might survive, grow stronger, and one day return. Nim gathered her findings and sent an urgent message to Admiral Voss within minutes. Her communication panel lit up with an incoming call from the Admiral himself. Dr. Nim, the Admiral's voice carried through the archives. Your report mentions a species called humans. Are you certain about this identification? The technology matches perfectly, Admiral. Fusion drives, primitive communication frequencies, and ship designs that emphasize function over form. Everything the Third Fleet is reporting corresponds to human technology from the pre-imperial period. But the records show they were extinct. The records show their homeworld was destroyed and their major colonies eliminated. But Admiral, approximately 30% of their population was never accounted for. They could have survived in deep space beyond imperial borders. There was a long pause before the Admiral responded. Dr. Nim, I need you to send me everything you have on human military tactics, technology, and psychology. If these beings have survived for 1,000 years, they may have capabilities we don't understand. I'll transmit the files immediately. Admiral, but sir, there's something else you should know. What is it? According to these records, humans were considered one of the most adaptable species the early empire encountered. They had a remarkable ability to learn from defeat and turn their weaknesses into strengths. If they've had 1,000 years to prepare for this moment. Nim didn't need to finish the sentence. The implications were clear. The Empire was facing an enemy that had been presumed dead for centuries, an enemy that had used that time to study Imperial weaknesses and develop countermeasures. As Dr. Nim transmitted her findings to the Admiral, she couldn't shake the feeling that she had just delivered news that would change the course of galactic history. The humans had returned, and they had not forgotten what the Empire had done to them. The question now was whether the Empire was prepared for what was coming next. The diplomatic vessel Harmony's Promise glided through space with the grace that only Imperial engineering could achieve. Its hull gleamed like polished pearl, curved surfaces reflecting the light of nearby stars. Every line spoke of peaceful intentions, from the ornate communication arrays to the ceremonial markings that identified it as a ship of diplomacy rather than war. Captain Lore adjusted his formal robes as he reviewed the first contact protocols one final time. In his 30 years of diplomatic service, he had successfully negotiated with over 40 different species. His record was flawless. Every encounter had ended with new members joining the Empire, grateful for the protection and prosperity that Imperial membership provided. The bridge of the Harmony's Promise was designed to impress. Holographic displays showed the beauty of Imperial worlds, while soft music played melodies that had been scientifically proven to calm most known species. The crew wore dress uniforms, their movements precise and welcoming. "Captain," the navigation officer announced, "we're approaching the coordinates provided by the Third Fleet. The unknown vessel should be visible soon." Lore nodded confidently. "Prepare the standard greeting package. Full translation matrix, cultural gift samples, and membership application forms. Let's make sure our new friends understand the benefits of joining the Empire." The main view screen activated, showing empty space at first. Then, gradually, a shape emerged from the darkness. Lore's confident expression faltered as he saw the vessel for the first time. The ship was ugly. There was no other word for it. Where Imperial vessels flowed like water, this thing was all angles and harsh lines. Its surface was gray metal, scarred and pitted as if it had been through countless battles. Weapon ports dotted its hull like angry eyes, and its engines glowed with a harsh blue light that hurt to look at directly. "That's their ship?" Lore asked, unable to hide his disappointment. "Yes, sir. The vessel identifies itself as the Defiant Dawn." Lore straightened his robes and prepared his most diplomatic smile. "Open a communication channel. Standard greeting protocol." The view screen flickered and suddenly showed the interior of the alien vessel. Lore expected to see a primitive bridge, perhaps crude controls and rough metal walls. Instead, he found himself looking at a surprisingly sophisticated command center. The technology was different from Imperial standards, but it was clearly advanced. A figure stepped into view, and Lore felt his diplomatic training engage automatically. The being was clearly the species from Dr. Nim's files. Bipedal, about 2 meters tall, with smooth skin and strange hair covering the top of its head. Its eyes were small compared to most species, but they seemed to take in everything with sharp intelligence. "I am Captain Lore of the Imperial Diplomatic Corps," he began, his voice carrying the warm tones that had charmed dozens of species. "On behalf of the Galactic Empire, I welcome you to our space and offer you the protection and prosperity that comes with Imperial membership." The human studied him for a long moment before responding. When it spoke, its voice was calm and measured, speaking perfect galactic standard. "I am Captain Reed of the Terran Expeditionary Force. We appreciate your greeting, Captain Lore, but we're not here to join your empire." Lore's smile never wavered. This was normal. Many species initially resisted Imperial membership until they understood the benefits. "I understand your caution, Captain Reed. Many species have concerns about joining a larger galactic community. Perhaps you would benefit from reviewing our membership package. The Empire offers protection from pirates, access to advanced technology, and prosperity beyond your current capabilities." Captain Reed's expression didn't change. "We're familiar with Imperial protection, Captain. Our ancestors experienced it firsthand about 1,000 years ago." The words hit Lore like a physical blow. If these beings were connected to the ancient Records Dr. Nim had discovered, then this was no simple first contact. This was something much more dangerous. "I'm not sure what you mean," Lore said carefully. "Perhaps there's been some misunderstanding. The Empire has always sought peaceful cooperation with all species." "The Empire sought to eliminate my people," Reed replied, his voice still calm but carrying an edge of steel. "You destroyed our homeworld, scattered our colonies, and declared us extinct. We didn't cross the void to kneel to the same tyrants who tried to wipe us out." Lore felt his diplomatic training failing him. This wasn't supposed to happen. First contact was supposed to be peaceful, welcoming, beneficial to both sides. "Captain Reed, I assure you that the Empire has no hostile intentions toward your people. Whatever happened in the past, we can work together to build a better future. You want to work together?" Reed gestured to someone off-screen. "Show him." The view screen split, showing both Reed and a tactical display. Lore's eyes widened as he saw the true scope of the human vessel. What he had thought was a simple ship was actually a massive military installation. Weapon systems that could level cities, armor plating that could withstand anything the Empire could throw at it, and, most disturbing of all, energy readings that suggested the ship was capable of much more than it was currently displaying. "This is the Defiant Dawn," Reed continued. "She's one of 27 vessels in the first wave of our return. We've spent 1,000 years preparing for this moment, studying your strengths and weaknesses, learning everything we could about the Empire that tried to destroy us." Lore's diplomatic mask finally slipped. "You're threatening the Empire?" "I'm informing the Empire," Reed corrected. "We didn't return to your space to start a war. We came to reclaim what was stolen from us. The worlds our ancestors colonized, the resources that were taken, the lives that were lost. We're here to collect what you owe us." "The Empire will never surrender to threats," Lore said, his voice shaking with indignation. "Our fleets are the most powerful in the galaxy. Our technology is beyond your comprehension. Your primitive ship cannot stand against the might of the Imperial Navy." Reed's expression finally changed, a slight smile crossing his features. "Captain Lore, let me show you something about human technology." The tactical display on the view screen changed, showing 3 Imperial probe ships that had been following the Harmony's Promise at a safe distance. Lore watched in horror as energy beams lanced out from the Defiant Dawn, striking all 3 probes simultaneously. The ships didn't just explode. They simply ceased to exist, vaporized by weapons that fired faster than Imperial sensors could track. "Those probes were unmanned," Reed said quietly. "This time. Next time, we might not be so generous." Lore stared at the empty space where the probes had been. In 30 years of diplomatic service, he had never encountered a species that could casually destroy Imperial technology with such ease. The weapons that had eliminated those ships were beyond anything in the Imperial arsenal. "What do you want?" Lore asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Justice," Reed replied. "The Empire. We'll return what was taken from us, or we'll take it ourselves. We've waited 1,000 years for this moment, Captain. We're not going to be denied by diplomatic words or empty threats." The communication channel closed, leaving Lore staring at an empty view screen. Around him, his crew worked frantically to process what they had just witnessed. The first contact had failed completely, and the implications were terrifying. The humans had returned, and they had not come in peace. Admiral Voss floated in the command chamber of his flagship, the massive dreadnought, Imperial Wrath. The chamber was filled with a specialized atmosphere that allowed his gaseous form to maintain cohesion while interfacing directly with the ship's systems. Around him, holographic displays showed the positions of over 200 Imperial vessels, the largest fleet ever assembled for a single engagement. The tactical situation should have been simple. One primitive human ship against the full might of the Imperial Navy. Every simulation had predicted total victory within minutes. Yet 3 hours into the engagement, the Defiant Dawn was still operational, still fighting and still causing casualties among the Imperial forces. "Status report," Voss commanded, his voice resonating through the chamber's speakers. The human vessel continues to evade our targeting systems, reported the tactical officer, a crystalline shard whose mathematical precision was legendary. They've destroyed 17 of our ships and damaged 43 more. Our own weapons have achieved no significant hits. Voss studied the battle display with growing frustration. The human ship moved through space like nothing he had ever seen. It didn't follow conventional tactical patterns. Instead of maintaining formation or following predictable flight paths, it seemed to move randomly, yet every movement placed it in the perfect position to avoid incoming fire while delivering devastating attacks. How are they doing this? Voss asked. Their ship is primitive. Their weapons are crude. By every measure, they should be easy targets. Sir, the sensor operator interjected, I think I understand part of the problem. The human ship is constantly modifying itself during battle. They're moving components around, changing their configuration, adapting to our attacks in real time. Voss's form rippled with confusion. Modifying themselves? During combat? Yes, sir. Watch this. The operator highlighted a section of the human ship on the display. 20 minutes ago, this was a cargo bay. Now it's a weapons platform. They're literally rebuilding their ship while fighting us. The concept was so foreign to Imperial thinking that Voss struggled to process it. Imperial ships were built to precise specifications, their systems optimized for maximum efficiency. The idea of tearing apart your own vessel during combat was insane, yet somehow the humans were making it work. Sir, the communications officer called out, we're receiving a transmission from the Defiant Dawn. Put it through. Captain Reed's face appeared on the main display, his expression calm despite the chaos of battle around him. Behind him, Voss could see human crew members working frantically at their stations, their movements quick and purposeful. Admiral Voss, Reed said, his voice carrying easily over the sounds of combat, I'm impressed by your fleet. 200 ships, all perfectly coordinated, following textbook Imperial tactics. Very impressive. Surrender now, Voss demanded, and your crew will be treated according to Imperial law. Reed smiled. Admiral, let me ask you something. In all your years of service, have you ever fought an enemy that refused to follow the rules? Rules? Your tactics manuals, your strategic doctrines, your whole approach to warfare. It's all based on the assumption that your enemies will behave in predictable ways. But what happens when they don't? Before Voss could respond, the human ship suddenly accelerated directly toward the center of the Imperial formation. Every instinct screamed at Voss to order his ships to scatter, but that would break formation and create chaos. Instead, he ordered his vessels to maintain position and concentrate their fire. The Defiant Dawn plunged into the heart of the Imperial fleet, its weapons blazing. But instead of trying to fight its way out, the ship did something impossible. It began to break apart. What are they doing? Voss demanded. Sir, the human ship is separating into multiple components. They're using their own hull sections as weapons. Voss watched in horror as pieces of the human ship, each one now functioning as an independent fighter, spread throughout his formation. The Imperial vessels, designed to fight large targets, found themselves overwhelmed by dozens of smaller, more agile opponents. All ships engage independently, Voss ordered. Ignore formation protocols, but it was too late. The humans had turned the Imperial fleet's greatest strength into a weakness. The tight formation that allowed for maximum firepower coordination now trapped the Imperial ships in a deadly maze of human fighters. Every shot risked hitting a friendly vessel, while the human craft moved with impossible coordination. Admiral, the tactical officer reported, we're detecting unusual energy signatures from the human fighters. They appear to be using some kind of networked intelligence system. Networked intelligence? The human pilots are sharing information instantaneously. They're operating as a single entity with multiple bodies. When one fighter learns something, they all learn it immediately. Voss felt his gaseous form begin to lose cohesion as stress overwhelmed his systems. The humans were using their own primitive technology in ways that Imperial science couldn't explain. They were turning every disadvantage into an advantage, every weakness into a strength. Sir, the human fighters are regrouping. They're reassembling into their original ship configuration. On the display, Voss watched as the scattered human craft came together like pieces of a puzzle. Within minutes, the Defiant Dawn was whole again, its hull apparently undamaged despite the fierce battle. But now it was positioned perfectly to attack the Imperial fleet's most vulnerable ships. "How many vessels have we lost?" Voss asked quietly. 47. Destroyed, 91 damaged, sir. The human ship appears to be completely operational. Voss stared at the tactical display in disbelief. His massive fleet, the pride of the Imperial Navy, was being systematically destroyed by a single enemy vessel, not through superior technology or overwhelming firepower, but through tactics so unconventional that Imperial computers couldn't predict or counter them. "Admiral," Reed's voice came through the speakers again, "your fleet is impressive, but you're fighting yesterday's war. We've spent 1,000 years learning how to beat you. Every victory you've won, every tactic you've used, every weakness, you've exploited in other species. We've studied it all. You cannot defeat the entire empire," Voss replied, though his voice lacked conviction. "We don't need to defeat the empire," Reed said. "We just need to remind it why it feared us in the first place. Your ancestors knew what we were capable of. They destroyed our homeworld not because we were weak, but because we were too dangerous to leave alive." The transmission cut out, leaving Voss alone with his thoughts. Around him, the battle continued, but the outcome was no longer in doubt. The humans had proven their point. They could fight the Empire and win. More disturbing was the realization that this was just the beginning. The Defiant Dawn was only one ship, and according to intelligence reports, there were dozens more on their way. If one human vessel could do this to the Imperial fleet, what would happen when they all arrived? For the first time in his career, Admiral Voss gave an order he had never expected to give. All ships withdraw to minimum safe distance. Maintain defensive positions only. The Imperial fleet retreated, leaving the humans in control of the battlefield. The impossible war had begun, and the Empire was already losing. The Imperial Council chamber had never seen such chaos. Representatives from hundreds of worlds filled the vast space, their voices rising in panic as reports flooded in from across the galaxy. The carefully maintained order that had governed the Empire for 1,000 years was crumbling as news of human attacks reached every corner of Imperial space. Emperor Zalth stood at the center of the chamber, his ancient form trembling with rage and fear. The crystalline being had ruled the Empire for over 6 centuries, guiding it through countless crises. But nothing had prepared him for this moment. "Report," he commanded, his voice cutting through the chaos. Admiral Voss materialized before the Emperor, his gaseous form barely maintaining cohesion. "Your Majesty, we have confirmed human presence in 17 systems. Their ships are operating independently, but with perfect coordination. They're not trying to conquer territory. They're systematically destroying our ability to govern." "Explain." "They're targeting infrastructure, Your Majesty. Communication networks, supply lines, administrative centers. They're not killing civilians. But they're making it impossible for us to maintain control over our own territory." The Emperor's form pulsed with angry light. "How many ships?" "At least 50, possibly more. They appear to be using some kind of advanced manufacturing system. We've observed them building new vessels from salvaged materials, including our own destroyed ships." A gasp ran through the chamber. The idea that the humans could turn Imperial technology against the Empire was terrifying. "What do they want?" demanded the representative from the core worlds, a tall, elegant being whose species had been among the Empire's founding members. Admiral Voss hesitated before answering. "They want justice, Your Majesty. They've made their demands clear. They want the Empire to acknowledge what was done to their people, return territories that were taken from human colonies, and provide reparations for the genocide attempt." "Genocide attempt?" The Emperor's voice was cold. "The historical records show that the humans were eliminated during the First Galactic War. It was a military necessity. With respect, Your Majesty, the humans survived. And they remember everything? The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The Empire had built its foundation on the assumption that the humans were extinct, that their threat had been eliminated forever. The discovery that they had not only survived but grown stronger was shaking the very foundations of imperial power. "Sir," a new voice interrupted. It was Dr. Nim, the elderly archivist who had first identified the human threat. "I've been studying the intercepted human communications. There's something you need to know." The Emperor gestured for her to continue. "The humans aren't just seeking revenge, Your Majesty. They're conducting what they call a reclamation operation. They believe they have a legal right to everything." "They're taking legal right?" The Emperor's form flared brighter. "By whose authority?" "By the authority of the original Galactic Accords, Your Majesty. The documents that establish the legal framework for interstellar expansion." "The humans have copies of the original treaties signed by their representatives over 1,000 years ago." Dr. Nim activated a holographic display showing ancient documents written in dozens of different languages. According to these agreements, the human colonies were legal settlements protected by galactic law. When the Empire destroyed them, it violated the very treaties that gave the Empire its own legal authority. The chamber erupted in angry voices. Representatives demanded to know how this was possible, how the Empire could have built itself on illegal foundations. "The humans spent 1,000 years in exile, Your Majesty," Dr. Nim continued. "They used that time to study law, to understand the legal basis for galactic civilization. They've built their entire return strategy around exposing the Empire's illegal origins. This is impossible," the Emperor declared. "The Empire has governed the galaxy for 1,000 years. We have brought peace, prosperity, and order to countless worlds, built on the bones of my people." The voice came from the chamber's main communication system. Every being in the room turned to see Captain Reed's face on the displays, his expression calm but implacable. "How did you access this channel?" the Emperor demanded. "The same way we accessed your fleet communications, Your Majesty. We've had 1,000 years to study your systems. There's very little about the Empire that we don't understand." "What do you want?" "I want you to hear the truth," Reed replied. "The Empire has told itself a story for 1,000 years. You've convinced yourselves that you're bringing order to the galaxy, that you're the rightful rulers of the stars. But your empire was built on murder and theft. The humans were eliminated because they were a threat to galactic peace," the Emperor said firmly. "We were eliminated because we refused to surrender our freedom to your tyranny. My people fought for their right to exist as an independent species, and you responded by trying to wipe us out completely." Reed's image gestured, and the display changed to show star charts. "These are the locations of human colonies that were destroyed during your first galactic war, 57 worlds, home to over 2 billion people. Men, women, and children who were killed for the crime of wanting to remain free." The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the ancient tragedy became clear. The Empire had justified its actions as military necessity, but the truth was more disturbing. The humans had been eliminated not because they were evil, but because they represented an alternative to imperial rule. "You survived," the Emperor said quietly. "How?" "Because we're harder to kill than you thought," Reed replied. "My ancestors escaped in ships like the Defiant Dawn. They fled to the dark spaces between galaxies, places where even your sensors couldn't find them. They built hidden colonies in dead systems, asteroid fields, the hearts of nebulae. For 1,000 years they waited and prepared. Prepared for what? For this moment? For the day when we would return to reclaim what was stolen from us." The Emperor's form pulsed with frustrated energy. "You cannot hope to defeat the entire Empire. We have millions of ships, billions of soldiers, the resources of 10,000 worlds." "Your Majesty," Reed's voice carried a note of something that might have been pity, "you still don't understand. We're not here to conquer your empire. We're here to replace it." The display changed again, showing a real-time map of the galaxy. Red markers appeared across Imperial space, each one representing a human operation in progress. The scope of The invasion was staggering. The humans weren't just attacking military targets. They were systematically dismantling the infrastructure that held the Empire together. "This is impossible," Admiral Voss gasped. "Our intelligence networks would have detected a force this large." "Your intelligence networks have been compromised for decades," Reed replied calmly. "We've been watching you, learning from you, preparing. For you. Every Imperial ship that disappeared in the Outer Rim, every pirate attack on your supply lines, every technical malfunction in your communication systems. We've been testing your defenses for 50 years. The Emperor stared at the display in growing horror. The red markers were everywhere, spreading like a disease through Imperial space. "How many of you are there?" "Enough." "We've had 1,000 years to grow, Your Majesty. To build, to multiply, to prepare. The galaxy is large, and we've learned to use every corner of it." Dr. Nim stepped forward, her ancient form trembling with the weight of revelation. "Your Majesty, the human population could number in the hundreds of billions by now. If they've maintained their original reproduction rates and established successful colonies, they could rival our own numbers." "They could," Reed confirmed. "But numbers aren't what will defeat you. What will defeat you is something your empire has forgotten how to do, which is change, adapt, learn from failure. For 1,000 years, the empire has relied on the same tactics, the same strategies, the same assumptions about how the galaxy works. You've become predictable, stagnant, weak." The Emperor's voice rose to a roar. "The Empire has brought peace to the galaxy." "The Empire has brought submission to the galaxy," Reed corrected. "You've created a civilization where innovation is discouraged, where independence is crushed, where entire species exist only to serve imperial needs. You call it peace, but it's really just a very successful form of slavery." Around the chamber, representatives began to murmur among themselves. Many of the Empire's member species had joined willingly, grateful for imperial protection and prosperity. But others had been conquered, their cultures suppressed, their independence sacrificed for the greater good of imperial order. "What happens now?" the Emperor asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "Now you have a choice," Reed replied. "You can continue to fight, and will continue to dismantle your empire piece by piece. Or you can acknowledge what you did to my people, return what was stolen from us, and help us build something better." "And if we refuse?" Reed's expression hardened. "Then you'll learn why your ancestors were so afraid of us that they tried to commit genocide. You'll discover what happens when humans stop being polite and start being practical." The communication ended, leaving the Imperial Council in stunned silence. For 1,000 years, they had been the undisputed masters of the galaxy. Now, in the span of a few days, their entire worldview had been shattered. The Emperor looked around the chamber at the faces of his advisors and representatives. He saw fear, confusion, and growing doubt about the Empire's ability to handle this crisis. "Your Majesty," Admiral Voss said quietly, "what are your orders?" The Emperor was silent for a long moment, processing the magnitude of the situation. The humans had returned with a vengeance, armed with superior technology, flawless coordination, and most dangerous of all, the absolute moral certainty that they were fighting for justice. "Recall all fleets to defensive positions around the core worlds," he finally ordered. "Establish communication with the human leadership. We need to understand exactly what they want. And if their demands are unacceptable?" The Emperor's crystalline form dimmed as the weight of his decision settled upon him. "Then we prepare for the end of the Empire as we know it." As the council dispersed to carry out his orders, the Emperor remained alone in the vast chamber. Outside, the galaxy continued to turn, but everything had changed. The age of imperial dominance was ending, and the age of human reckoning had begun. In the darkness between the stars, dozens of human ships continued their work, methodically, dismantling 1,000 years of imperial rule. They moved with the patience of a species that had waited centuries for justice, and the determination of beings who would not be denied again. The Empire had forgotten the humans once. It would not make that mistake again.